Now we're on the chapter of bidding the good and forbidding the evil. Al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar. Why is this chapter in a book of Aqidah? What does bidding the good and forbidding the evil have to do with the Aqidah? When we say bidding the good, that means you're saying, bidding here means commanding. So that means you're saying pray, fast. Forbidding the evil means you're saying stop that. That's haram. So what does that have to do with the Aqidah? Since bidding the good and forbidding the evil is an obligation, then that's why we debate in the matter of the creed. Why are we debating in creed? Why are we learning how to argue with Wahhabis and atheists and destiny deniers and those sorts of people? Because that's part of bidding the good and forbidding the evil. So that's the relevance of this chapter in a book of Aqidah. And also add to that this bidding the good and forbidding the evil is one of our sheikh's top priorities. His top priorities that he instilled in us, rahimahullah, are learning and teaching the proper creed and bidding and the good and forbidding the evil. Even the person who does the evil is still obligated to forbid the evil. To remind you, don't exclude yourself if you are an evildoer. The scholar said, the one who pours the wine, is still obligated to forbid the other one from drinking it. So according to that, then none of us are excused from bidding the good and forbidding the evil when we're able to. So here in this chapter of bidding the good and forbidding the evil, we have this hadith, fundamental hadith in the chapter. مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ. Whoever among you saw the munkar, the objectionable, then let him change it with his hand. فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. And if unable, then by his tongue. فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ. And if unable, then let him hate it in his heart. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. And that is the weakest of faith. And so that's why here under this chapter we have to talk about arguing with deviant groups here. That's all this talk here, if you're not going to go into. So moving down, there's a subsection under bidding the good and forbidding the evil. The section on justifying the kalaam of AHLUS-SUNNAH. The kalaam means their religious rhetoric. Justifying the religious rhetoric, the theological rhetoric. One might even say religious talking points. How to do like that, how to talk like how the Muslim theologians did, how to argue like the Muslim theologians did, and why that's good, that's justified practice. So that's what this section here is. And it is here in this section that we drew attention to some of the intellectual arguments that are in the Quran. Intellectual arguments contained in the Quran. Because that's what this kalaam is. This kalaam of Ahlus-Sunnah is the way of argumentation and explaining the creed. It's explaining the creed and how to argue for the creed of the Muslims. And this is a jihad, actually. That's jihadul lisan. This, what I'm talking about now, is jihadul lisan, the jihad of the tongue, the verbal jihad. Not the jihad by the weapon. So this one, Sheikh told us to get busy with it. And I advise you, and I advise myself, to be busy with that. Learn the arguments. Even just start off simple. Go through the 13 attributes. Do you know the intellectual arguments for the 13 attributes? For the attribute of existence? What's the mental proof? The attribute of eternality with no beginning. What's the mental proof? Even before the intellect, even yani, just without considering for now the textual evidence, the ayah from the Quran or the hadith of the Prophet, just the rational proof. How do you arrange those and talk about that? Now, we're not going to go through the details we have here in this section. Then the next section was the chapter on the knowledge of the creed, meaning this discipline. This is a chapter for just elaborating generally and in a very broad sense about the science of the creed. And here in the footnote, since we're talking about the science of the creed, the discipline itself, then in the footnote, we took a moment to digress to talk about, we didn't read it in, I don't think we read it in our lesson. Maybe we did, I don't remember. About some other sciences other than the science of the creed. We have fiqh, which is sacred law, practical rules, and usul al-fiqh, which is the clockwork behind those practical rules. Now I'm not going to go into all these Quranic sciences like learning recitations or knowing recitations of the Quran, knowing how to write a mushaf, knowing the interpretation of the Quran, etc. Hadith sciences like the science of narration and the hadith terminology, and also there's sciences in the Arabic language, nahu, syntax or grammar, sarf, conjugation, balagha, which is rhetoric or eloquence, and also another religious science is tasawwuf, Sufism. That's a valid science. So those are some religious sciences, a number of religious sciences with brief details there. All of that is in the footnote under this chapter about the knowledge of the creed, which is the most important science. We said that this knowledge of the creed has names, several names. You can call it ilm al-aqidah, ilm al-aqidah, the knowledge of the aqidah, the creed. You can call it ilm al-tawheed, the knowledge of the oneness of God. Yani, the knowledge of monotheism, the monotheism with a capital M. So we're calling this knowledge of the creed ilm tawheed, the knowledge of the monotheism, ilm al-aqidah, the knowledge of the creed or the knowledge of the conviction. It's also called ilm al-usul, the knowledge of the basics. It's also called usuluddin, which is basics of the religion, because the belief is the basic, it's the fundamental. The belief is the most important. How many people they say the Shahada and they learn outwardly how to pray and how to cover and how to fast, and they didn't learn the belief. They built walls and they built a ceiling and they never even built a floor. And also, this knowledge is called ilmul kalam, the knowledge of kalam, which I just told you what that means. And it's called ilmul kalami was sifat, the knowledge of kalam and of the attributes of God. And we define that. You're taking notes, inshallah. And we define that knowledge. And we define that knowledge. What is that? What is that ilmul aqidah here? It is the method of confirming. It is the method of confirming the creedal doctrines. The method, the way, the process of confirming, verifying the creedal doctrines, yani the belief. The way of confirming the beliefs by using evidence, textual evidence, yani Quran and Hadiths. So you have to memorize those if you want them. For those who agree with the sacred law, and mental arguments for those who disagree with the sacred law. Two types of proofs: mental proofs and textual proofs. We mentioned that last week. We have another definition here also for the knowledge of kalam, ilmul kalam. Ilmul kalam, it was said that it is the knowledge, it is the field that discusses the names of God and the attributes and doings of God and the situations of creations such as the angels, yani the cases of creations like the angels, the prophets, the saints, and the imams, yani the caliphs. Imams here means the caliphs. That's part of the creed. Our belief about caliphate, that's part of the creed, and that is a chapter in the knowledge of the creed. Belief in imamah, rulership or caliphate. And it discusses this field, the creation of the world and the resurrection and the like. That's the knowledge of Kalam, the knowledge of the creed. According to the religious fundamentals, that means the religious proofs, according to the religious proofs, not philosophy. Philosophy is something else. Philosophy is a mental craft, a mental craft. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking unconventionally. It's a way of unconventional thinking, a method of unconventional thinking. We talked about that before. I don't want to go into all of that now. But it's not good anyway. Philosophy is haram, actually. Philosophy is haram. And if a person does not have enough knowledge to protect himself, it is forbidden to read in books of philosophy. For whoever does not have sufficient knowledge to protect his creed from fallacies, it is forbidden to read in books of philosophy and other books of misguidance. Then, under this field, this knowledge or discipline of the creed, we talked about three three belief systems. These are the three belief systems about God of all religions. These three cover all religions, all of them. All the religions boil down to these three. Likening, that means comparing God to the creation. So that's your Christians, Jews, idol worshippers, Hindus, etc. All that's likening. Your pagans, pagan Aboriginal peoples in different areas. Different places have Aboriginal or Aborigine peoples. Australia, North America, etc., South America. Those pagan Aborigines of different places, they're all likeners or comparers, God comparers. It's tashbih. Atheism, so God comparing, that's one end of a spectrum. Then you have atheism, that's the other end of a spectrum, which is God denial, actually, denial of God's existence. Or what leads to the denial of God's existence. For us, this is what atheism means here. Atheism here does not merely only mean blatant denial of God's existence. Here, for us, atheism means that and subtle atheism, meaning if you want some underhanded atheism. We talked about that in some different classes, like the people who say Allah does not have attributes. So they're saying he exists, but they're saying he doesn't have attributes, which really would mean he doesn't exist, though. So it's atheism. And between those two extremes is the belief of Muslims. Exaltation, tanzih. So exaltation is what? Neither of the other two. So it's not comparing God to the creation, and it's not denying his existence. And both extremes see this middle as the other extreme. So for the likener, the exalter is an atheist. And for the atheist, the exalter is a likener. So because the exalter, the one who believes in exaltation of God, that's his belief system. That's a belief system here, not just a word. Exaltation here, the word in Arabic is tanzih. Tanzih. That's a belief system. That's believing that God exists without being like anything. That's the meaning of exaltation here. So we're saying God exists without being like anything. So the part where we say without being like anything, that's why the likeners call us atheists. Because we're saying not a shape, not a form, not a color, no place, no direction. So they say, what? You're denying God's existence. So they thought we were atheists. And also, we say God exists. And the atheist says nothing exists unless it's physical matter. Only matter exists. Yani, some atheists, they say that. Others, they have other words. So when we say God exists, then to the atheist, we're a likener. He's saying, what? If God exists, he would have to be like something. That's what they're basically saying. They're saying to us, so if you believe God exists, you must think he's like something. So we're in the middle. The belief system of exaltation is between God comparing and God denying. God exaltation. Is there any question about that? Is that clear, inshallah? Yes.
Does that where moderation come from? In the middle?
That's one example of moderation. Moderation is a consistent theme throughout our religion. So when you find some different issues in our religion, you would find that the right position is the moderate one. Like here, this is a case where the right position is a moderate one between two extremes. And here's the ayah from the Quran that has the proof of what you asked me, brother. When Allah says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, like that we have made you a moderate nation, a nation in the middle. That is ayat 143 of Surah Al-Baqarah. You're welcome. And that's why in this title here, exaltation came in the middle, because it's the moderate position. Otherwise, since the belief system of exaltation is really the right belief, it should be mentioned first, just by giving preference to the truth. But because of that meaning of moderation, it was put in the middle here in this title. But then, if you look here at our contents, then when we wanted to elaborate afterwards, here in the title, exaltation is in the middle. But when we wanted to elaborate on each three with detail, we did advance exaltation. And then we went to likening, because that's more, comparing God to creations is more prevalent than atheism. And then we went to atheism after that. Then we went to talk about Islam and Iman. Islam and Iman. In talking about Islam and Iman, why they're mentioned together here? They're mentioned together in the title because they are inseparable. And we have our quotes here. We quoted our Shaykh here about Islam and Iman being inseparable. We quoted Abu Hanifa also about Islam and Iman being the same. So, because they're inseparable and the same, they got a chapter together. Islam and Iman. There, we gave the quotes that talk about both of those together and what they mean. And then we talked about each one by one. Iman, that's the heart's belief. That's the faith of the heart, the Iman. But what verifies that Iman is saying the Shahaadah. And as for Islam, Islam is the tongue's confession. Islam is the tongue's confession to that heart's belief. That's why they go together. What you believe in your heart is not valid without saying it with your tongue, the Shahada. And what you say with your tongue is not valid without believing in it in the heart. And under the section of Iman, faith, we talked about whether faith increases or decreases. Whether or not faith, we talked about whether or not faith increases and decreases. So we talked about that there, how the scholars differed about this issue. And we gave hadiths about this issue. And since Islam is the verbal confession, then we had to talk about the Shahada itself. So, in the process of talking about the Shahada, we talked about some of its judgments, when you have to say it in Arabic, and when you don't have to say it in Arabic. When do you have to say the Shahada in Arabic? When you're praying. When you don't have to say the Shahada in Arabic to become a Muslim. We talked about the obligation of uttering the Shahada and how to actually pronounce the Shahada in Arabic and how you can translate it too. And we talked about the precautionary Shahada. That's the Shahada one says when he knows that something is kufr, but he doesn't know if he did it or not. So then he says the Shahada in case he did do it so that he would be cleared of it. So moving on here, then we started talking about Tawassul. Tawassul. And the title of this entire section here is IBAADAH, meaning worship. Tawassul, and seeking blessings from relics. Relics means things left behind. So that includes the Prophet's hairs and clothing or anything from him, alayhi salatu wassalam. And included in that are also the relics from the pious people. Ash-Shafi'i himself, it was reported that he saw blessings from the shirt of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. It was said that Ash-Shafi'i sought blessings from the shirt of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So we went through that very important chapter for dealing with Wahhabis. So in the process of talking about that, we defined worship or ibadah, غاية الخضوع والخشوع, the most extreme humbleness and humility. Inshallah, you've memorized that. You have your definitions down. And so after defining ibadah, we went to talk about what's not ibadah, worship. What does not fit the definition of worship. So that's how you refute a Wahhabi in this case. You have to know the definition of worship. And then when you know the definition of worship and some references for that, then after that, you just debunk everything the Wahhabi says that's other than that definition of worship. So we said here, mere obedience is not worship, being obedient to someone. Mere humility is not worship, being humble or lowering oneself to someone. Mere calling is not worship, calling out to someone or calling upon someone doesn't mean you worship them. Tawassul by the prophets and walis is not worship of other than Allah. So when you say, oh Allah, I ask you by the prophet, that's not worshiping someone other than Allah. Merely seeking help is not worship. All this the Wahhabis said, so that's how it came out like that. We weren't just choosing stuff to say what's not worship. We had to respond to the Wahhabi claims. Merely seeking refuge with someone is not worship. That's a very strong and effective one for refuting Wahhabis in the chapter of Tawassul. This one breaks them very well because of the hadith being a reliable hadith that Al-Harith ibn Hassan al-Bakri said in the Prophet's presence, أعوذ بالله ورسوله أن أكون كوافد عاد sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I seek refuge with Allah and His Messenger. That's the proof there. I seek refuge with Allah and His Messenger from being like the delegate of the tribe of Ad. It's enough just to mention this first part of the hadith. أعوذ بالله ورسوله. This, just if a Wahhabi hears those words, I seek refuge with Allah and His Messenger, it's worse than scratching on the chalkboard for him. It's a very, very heart-wrenching statement for a Wahhabi to hear it. I seek refuge with Allah and His Messenger. And then you drill him with the hadith. Don't let him get away. You just need to know your references, though. And seeking blessings from the graves is not worship of someone other than Allah. And seeking help at a grave is not worship of someone other than Allah. Visiting a Muslim's grave is not worship of other than Allah. I remember once we buried a Muslim, and I don't know who these people were, who were some people who were at the funeral. So after we buried the Muslim, and usually everybody's standing all around the grave because everyone's filling in the hole and everything. So it turns out usually that the grave is going to be surrounded by everyone who's there as they're burying him. So once he's buried, then the Muslims start making dua and they raise their hands and they make dua. So one time when I was at a funeral and then all the Muslims started doing that, there was one person, when he saw that, his eyebrows went up like he was so concerned. And then he turned away from the grave and raised his hand and made dua. So that's probably a Wahhabi right there. He thinks that the Muslims are worshiping that grave. Or he's even afraid that they're worshiping that grave because of his own suspicions, because of his own ill suspicions of others, and his misconception of what worship means. Seeking blessings from the relics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tabarruk, that's not worshiping someone other than Allah. And tabarruk has very strong evidence from the Quran, not just from the hadith. We have here all these proofs from the hadith for tabarruk, seeking blessings from relics. Yani we have here how the Prophet ﷺ distributed his hairs, how he spit into the mouth of the possessed child, he distributed his nails, and other things. We have all this from the hadiths. But I have a question for you, brothers and sisters. Does anyone have a proof from the Quran? You don't have to give me the ayah, just give me the issue. A proof from the Quran about tabarruk, seeking blessings from relics. And there's something in particular I'm interested in that I'm looking for. There's more than one proof, but there's something in particular I'm looking for. From what?
From a blessed land, like he went through.
Okay, when he took his sandals off? Okay, so he took his sandals off so he could be in contact with the blessed ground where he was. That's true. That's a correct answer. I'm looking for something though. Wa alaikum salam.
The mention of the taboot of Musa.
Yes. Tabutul Mithaq, the Ark of the Covenant. That was a chest that the Israelites had with the relics of Moses and Aaron. They used to keep it with them, and they used to take it to their jihad and fight with it in their ranks. Their hearts would be at peace when they would fight while having this chest. That's a very strong proof for tabarruk. Seeking blessings from relics. The fact that that's existing in the law and in the practice of the Israelites when they were Muslims, that shows that that's from the religion. That's not even special to the nation of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Which surah is this mentioned in about the Ark of the Covenant? Surah Al-Baqarah. It's in Surah Al-Baqarah.